Today is the first day of autumn here in the Northern Hemisphere, and I wanted to kick off the season with something cozy, something nice, and something that matches the weather that we're having right now. I wanted to kick off the season by showing you the books that I plan on reading within the next few months. I'm hesitant to say TBR because I don't think that I'll get through all of these books because I'm quite a slow reader, and I take my time with each book, and I have quite a few here. So I don't think that this is a TBR that I will be able to tackle in the next 3 months, but these are the books that I would like to reach for while the season is still cold and dark and rainy. So I guess a lot of them could go into winter, but regardless, this is my list of books that I would like to read during the fall. So the first one I've actually already started, and it's Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. This is the second part to Legends and Lattes, which is actually a prequel. It's not the second part. It's the second book in that kind of universe with the same character, but it's actually a prequel. Legends and Lattes was very popular because it was very like cozy fantasy, no action, like barely any action really. It's just more of like the vibes. And this is the second part, and it follows that kind of same format where it's not a hugely action-driven book. It's just purely for the vibes, and I love this. I loved the first one. I love Legends and Lattes. When I was reading that, I remember having a massive craving for cinnamon rolls. In fact, I baked cinnamon rolls for like 2 weeks after I read the book because I just couldn't shake it. And this gives kind of the same vibe. There's also a little bit of bakery talk involved. But it does give kind of the same vibes where it's just like you're in it for a cozy time. But anyway, I've already started this. I'm on page 87, and so far I'm really loving it. But basically the story of this is that Viv, who is an orc, that's Viv right there, is injured in one of the battles and has to, take a break to heal her leg. So her crew leaves her in this little town to be taken care of while they're going off and doing like other quests. And they'll come back to pick her up in a few weeks when she's healed. So during her time in this small town, she kind of just has to keep busy. And she finds a lot of things to do in a local bookshop that needs a little bit of help. So that's the premise, and that is exactly what the book is, at least what I've read so far, and based on what I learned with reading Legends and Lattes. And I think this is a good book to get you out of a reading slump if you are, interested in fantasy. The kind of fantasy that it is, it's basically based in like similar to the Dungeons and Dragons world, where if you like Dungeons and Dragons, then you will recognize everything that's happening here as kind of that same universe. I am a D&D player myself. I've been playing the same campaign for the last 3 years, going on 4 years. I don't know. But yeah, there's 6 of us. My husband is the DM, and we've been playing with the same characters for the past, almost 4 years. That's the kind of fantasy you're going to encounter here. There's no like world building. There's no like complex magic systems that Travis Baldree has come up with. It's literally the universe of Dungeons and Dragons. He just wrote like a mundane novel within the universe that has already been created. I love that I'm kicking off the season with this because I'm really enjoying it, and I think I'm going to continue enjoying it because I loved Legends and Lattes, and this just looks like the same. So if you have any recommendations on like cozy fantasies sort of like this one, please leave them down below because I love me some cozy fantasy. I love me some cozy anything, but yeah, I'm really starting to love the cozy fantasy world. So any recommendations are more than welcome. And sticking with the cozy genre, I have 2 more books that I picked up in London last year when I was there. I was at one of the huge Waterstones. I don't know which one it was exactly, but I saw they had a cozy crime area, like cozy thrillers, cozy crime. I think it was cozy crime or something like that. I didn't know that was a thing. I'd never heard of it that way. I mean, I assumed that those books existed. I didn't know it was like a whole subgenre, but it is. And they're very tiny books. They're tiny paperbacks. They have these fun covers with like very cozy ambience on them. And there's a lot of cats on the covers, of like a lot of cats involved. I obviously loved that. I when I saw that, I was hooked. So I decided to pick up 2 and I haven't read them yet. I picked these up last year and I haven't read them yet. So from what I know of this genre is that cozy crime is like taking out the more gory or scary or maybe a little bit uncomfortable parts of crime books, and it's just centered on like solving the mystery. So it's usually a female protagonist who is either a librarian or like a coffee shop owner or something cozy like that, and she takes it upon herself to solve a murder or any kind of mystery that's happening in her usually small town cozy vibe kind of place. So that's what I kind of gathered by reading the backs of most of these books. So I ended up picking up 2. So I have The Broken Spine by Dorothy St. James, which also has a gorgeous little cat on the cover, and it's a library or a bookshop, not sure. Love it. So this is the story of Trudel Beckett, who is a small town assistant librarian that discovers that protecting the printed word is harder than she'd ever imagined. In fact, it's murder. So basically, Trudel Beckett, known to her friends as True, finds herself in a bind when her library in lovely Cypress, South Carolina is turned into a state-of-the-art bookless technological center. I mean, this just that had me hooked. Someone fighting the corporate world from taking over the local library. I love that. A library with no books breaks True's book-loving heart, so she decides to rescue hundreds of beloved tomes slated from the town dump. Under the cover of darkness, True and her best friend, coffee shop owner Tori Green, I told you, it's like librarians, coffee shop owners, I mean, it's perfect. It's just perfect. True and her best friend, coffee shop owner Tori Green, and mysterious best-selling author Flossie Finnegan Baker set up a secret back room in the library's basement and prepare to open it to their most loyal, trustworthy patrons. But when the town manager, who is behind the big push for the library's transformation, is murdered, True becomes the prime suspect. If she gives the police her alibi, she'll have to explain about the secret book room and risk losing the books. It doesn't help that the officer in charge of the case is her old crush from high school, who broke her teenage heart. To keep herself out of jail and her beloved book room up and running, True, with the help of Tori, Flossie, and a stray brown tabby cat named Dewey Decimal, decides to investigate. And faster than you can say shh, True finds herself on the same page with a killer who would love to write her final chapter. It's just everything there, everything I just read is just perfect. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a reader of intense books. I enjoy an intense, heavy story. Like, my favorite book of all time is Lolita by Nabokov because it just has so many layers. I loved A Little Life. I cried my heart out with that one. I've recently been getting into Russian literature as well, so I love me a good intense book. But give me something like this and I will eat it up. Like, these are the perfect books for when I've overdone it with the intense books. I like to read like very softy books. I've tried dipping my toes into romance before, but I mentioned in my last book, the books that I read during the summer, that I'm just discovering that romance is not for me. But something like this, I think is going to be good because these are also light in the romance. I mean, there is romance, but they don't add like spice or anything like that. It's very like vanilla love. So honestly, these are the kind of books that when I'm not doing my best mentally, which lately hasn't been easy. I've had a rough patch mentally speaking. These kind of books and like the cozy fantasies, all of these things just really help me out in distracting myself. So I'm really excited to read this. And the other cozy mystery that I have is Lending a Pole by Laurie Cass. And this one, again, like I said, a cat, a mobile library. I mean, what can go wrong? This is apparently the first one in a series. And it says it's a book mobile cat mystery, so I'm guessing that it all revolves around the same main character. With the help of her rescue cat Eddie, librarian Minnie Hamilton is driving a bookmobile based in the resort town of Chilson, Michigan. But she'd better keep both hands on the wheel because it's going to be a bumpy ride. I love these. So Eddie followed Minnie home one day, and now she can't seem to shake the furry little shadow. But in spite of her efforts to contain her new pal, the tabby sneaks out and trails her all the way to the bookmobile on its maiden voyage. Before she knows it, her slinky stowaway becomes her cat co-pilot. What is not to love about this? Minnie and Eddie's first day visiting readers around the county seems to pass without trouble, until Eddie darts outside at the last stop and leads her to the body of a local man who's reached his final chapter. We had the same, yeah. So the killer on this one wants to write the main character's final chapter, and here the main character is trying to solve a murder of someone who reached their final chapter. I'm seeing a pattern here and I'm loving it, I'm not gonna lie. Initially, Minnie is ready to let the police handle the case, but Eddie seems to smell a rat. Together, they'll work to find the killer because a good librarian always knows when justice is overdue. There's puns, there's cats, there's murder mysteries. Sign me up. So I'm very excited to pick these two up. These look like the kind of books that I can get through in a weekend. Like one of these can probably last me a weekend because they do seem like they're going to be quite fast paced, so these might be the kind of books that I can get through in a weekend. I'm so excited to read these. Like just reading the back just made me so happy. So I'm very excited to read this. Now we're moving on to something a little bit more dark, and when I say dark I mean dark academia. I did read The Secret History a while ago. I loved it. I really think it's a great book. I am a lover of the academic setting in books, especially university settings. I don't care for like school settings, but university, like high school settings and stuff, but university settings, like bring them on. So I do enjoy a good dark academia aesthetic and book recommendation. And some of those book recommendations include these two books that I have here. So the first one is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is supposed to be very similar to The Secret History, so I'm curious to read it and see how similar it actually is. But yeah, I've seen it compared all the time. But I got this like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and never read it. The only thing I know is that it is similar to The Secret History, but here on the back we can read that Oliver Marks has just served 10 years for a murder he may or may not have committed. On the day of his release, he's greeted by the detective who put him into prison. Detective Colborne is retiring and he wants to know what really happened a decade before. As a young actor at an elite conservatory, Oliver noticed that his talented classmates seemed to play the same characters on stage and off, villain, hero, temptress, though he was always a supporting role. But when the teachers change the casting, a good-natured rivalry turns ugly, and the play spilled dangerously over into real life. When tragedy strikes, one of the 7 friends is found dead. The rest face their greatest acting challenge yet, convincing the police and themselves that they are blameless. So there's a murder, one of the students is dead, they're all kind of hiding what happened, so Secret History vibes, definitely, but we'll see how similar they are. I am excited to read this. I am noticing a little bit of a murder tendency in the books that I've picked out, but it goes with the vibes of the time of year, I guess. But yeah, excited to read this one and see how it compares to The Secret History. And the other like dark academia book that I've seen recommended is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have read R.F. Kuang before. I read Yellowface last summer and I really enjoyed that. I really like the way she writes. So I'm curious to see how this pans out, because I've heard that the writing is amazing, that the world building is superb, and I've also read that there's a lot of parallelisms with things that happen in the world right now. And from what I've heard, some of this revolves around translation. Again, I'm going to read what's in the back. An act of translation is always an act of betrayal. Oxford, 1836. The city of dreaming spires. It is the center of all knowledge and progress in the world, and at its heart is Babel, Oxford University's prestigious Royal Institute of Translation, the tower from which all the power of the empire flows. Orphaned in Canton and brought to England by a mysterious guardian, Robin Swift thought Babel a paradise until it became a prison. But can a student stand against an empire? So the fact that translators play a big role in this book is something that I was very, very interested in, because I almost became a translator myself. Back in the day, I wanted to become a translator. My dad's a translator. Anything that has to do with working with words and languages is just really interesting to me. I ended up going a different route, still in communication, but I didn't go down the path of translation. But I'm still very interested in it. So the fact that this is like translator centric is very interesting to me. So I'm really, really excited to read this. The next is a very well-known book, which is The Shadow in the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I have it in Spanish, which is La Sombra del Viento. because the original is written in Spanish. And I haven't read this yet, which is, I feel as a Spaniard, is a crime, because this is such an important book internationally speaking. Like, it's been translated to I don't know how many languages, it's won so many prizes, and I haven't read it yet. I've read other books by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, but I haven't read this one, which is like the most famous one. So I've had it for years and never read it, so I thought this would be a good time to read it. From what I know about it, it does fit this kind of autumny vibe, even though it's not exactly dark academia, it's not exactly falling into those categories. It does fit the vibe of like autumn winter, I guess, which is what I'm trying to do with these books. So this book is set in the early 20th century Barcelona, and from what I know is the story of a young man who visits the cemetery of the forgotten books with his father, and there he finds a haunted book that uncovers all of these secrets that have been hidden within the city for years. And that's really all I know about it. I try not to pay too much attention when people talk about this book because I want to read it and I don't want it spoiled. And I know it's like a crime that I haven't read this, but yeah, this is the year that I'm gonna attempt to read this, and I will let you know what I think. I realized I hadn't included any classics in this TBR, so I did pick one, because I have been trying to read a lot more classics. I've been getting more into classics these past like 5 or 6 years, and I'm trying to read them a little bit more. So for this season, I've picked Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, because this is one of the Jane Austens I haven't read. And I picked this book specifically for the season because I find that Jane Austen books remind me a lot of autumn and winter. There's always a lot of talk about the leaves and the countryside, and that it's always raining, someone gets drenched. It's very English in that way. There's something very cozy about Jane Austen novels that I seem to be drawn to during the autumn and winter months. So I picked this one as my next classics read, and yeah, I think I'm gonna like it. We could also mention this next one as kind of a classic, but not in the same classic category as Sense and Sensibility, but it is a more modern classic, and it's one that I haven't read, and that's Stephen King's It. This monster of a book, which I've had for years, and I've tried to bring myself to read it multiple times, and it's just one of those books where I grab it from my bookshelves, hold it in my hand, and immediately go, no, this is just, why is this so long? A lot of people have told me that it reads a lot faster than you would think for something this big, but my edition has 1,376 pages. Why? I want this to be the year where I finally start reading this. This can easily take me a year to finish because I'm not a very fast reader. I tend to abandon books halfway through and then pick them up like 3 months later. So this could easily take me like a year to read. But I want this to be the year when I actually start it, because I've tried to start this so many times and I always like get scared and just, I'm like, no, I'm gonna go grab one of my little cozy ones, and then I don't read it. So I'm challenging myself to actually start it. This is the only one I'm actually like challenging myself to start. The rest are just books that I'd like to read, but I don't really care if I don't end up reading them for time reasons or whatever. But this one is like, now it's personal now. Like this can't be on my bookshelf without having been read. So at this point, I think everyone knows what this is about, so I'm not even gonna get into it, but I think it's a classic horror book. We're entering spooky season, so what better time to actually start reading this than now? I will let you know how this goes, but I'd like to start it and at least reach a decent point where if I have to stop it for whatever reason, I can go back to it without having to read it from the beginning because I've forgotten everything. So I will let you know how this goes. This is the one that I'm most afraid of. The rest, and not because it's a horror book, it's because it's just 1,300 pages long. That's everything on my TBR. There's a bit of everything. There's a bit of cozy fantasy, there's a bit of mystery, there's a bit of horror, there's a classic thrown in there, there's dark academia. I think it's a good mix of books where all of them kind of fit the season in one way or another, so I'm happy with the selection. How many will I actually read? we'll have to find out. I'm not a fast reader by any means. I am quite a slow reader. I'm very, very influenced by the mood I'm in. I'm not someone who can read if... Sometimes I know that a lot of people read to wind down. If I'm too wound up, if I'm just like very overwhelmed with the world and everything, I can't concentrate on reading. So sadly for me, reading is not a wind down activity. It's more of a, I'm very much in the mood for reading, let's go ahead and read. Autumn lasts for 3 months, so that gives me 3 months to get through some of these books. How many will I get through? Doesn't matter, except for this one. I really want to read this one. I will update you on the progress of how my reading is going in a few weeks, maybe. I know that most people on my channel are here for like the Project Pan updates that I do, but I hope that at least some of you find these videos interesting because I really like talking about books. So I want to continue making these videos, even if they don't work as well as the makeup ones. I don't care. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good reading season as well, and let me know down in the comments if you are reading any kind of autumn themed books or spring if you are in the southern hemisphere. Take care and I'll see you in the next video.